Hey, this is Chip. Hey, I wanted to remind you before we delve into the 1980s with Jamie Shaw that every time you listen to the show, you can check out the episode page for the person that I'm interviewing at www.eriemusichistory.com. Just choose whichever season. Right now, we're in season two. On that page, I try to include photos that the person has given me of them over the years, and then sometimes they actually give me audio clips that I include on there also. You can also listen to the episode right off the website, so you don't have to download anything on your phone. If you're not into podcasts that way, you can go right to that episode page and listen to it right then and there. Also, when you're on the website, on the homepage, at the very top, you'll see a red button that says Become a Patron, and it is for Patreon. So if you want to donate any money to the podcast, which I greatly appreciate, you can do it that way. Some folks have asked me about that. So just click on that button, and it can be an ongoing payment or it can be a one-time thing. All right, I've got that out of the way. Let's get to episode 20 with Jamie Shaw. Thanks.
All right, Jamie Shaw, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming out.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Yeah, you brought some cool stuff. We're going to get into some of these Satin Steel stories, your ticket at the Troubadour. We were just catching up a little bit about each other because we really don't know each other that well.
Right.
We met at Raskeller
Yep.
A couple months ago when Januc's band was playing Full Circle, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know Januc?
I met him that night.
Oh, yeah?
And he's got a real neat history as well.
Indeed, he does. Yeah. Great guy. And one of the things that I always knew about you, obviously, from seeing the pictures and stuff on Facebook and talking to Jeff Kroc, obviously, past guest. But I always thought you were a guitar player, but in the Oneaters, you play drums.
Yeah. Interesting.
What's the primary instrument?
Well, I started playing guitar when I was about 15, and eventually evolved to drums.
Oh.
But I still play guitar. I'm like Dave Grohl, the opposite of Dave Grohl.
Yeah.
He went from drums to guitar. I went from guitar to drums.
Right.
So, but the funny thing is, whenever I was in a band, they usually practiced at my house.
Okay.
Then after practice, I would get on the drums and practice.
When the guy was gone.
When they were all gone.
So you got to practice on other people's drums.
Yeah. And I learned a lot by watching. So I learned a lot by watching Doug Welser.
Yeah, great drummer. Yeah. Right.
And Ron Lesh.
Okay, yeah.
Those two drummers, I've watched them. I used to own a lighting company, and I would provide lights for Friction.
I was going to say Ron was in Friction.
Yeah. And I would just watch those guys.
Yeah.
And I'd run my lights, to the beat of the drummers, and I knew everything they played.
Huh.
And I used to sound check Ron's drums. I loved it.
Yeah. And so were you working with Exit when Doug was with them?
Yeah,
or?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right.
I kind of got out of music for a little bit and just provided lights for a couple different bands.
So we'll get into the bands that you were in, but you started out in guitar,
Yes.
right? So what was the first band like that you were as a drummer?
Well, the first band I was, it was a very temporary thing.
Okay.
This was back late 80s, I believe. Boy, I can't remember.
Did you have your own drums?
No.
Okay, that's why I wondered.
It was always the drummer that left him at my house.
Yeah.
And so there was a band, a friend of mine, Max Tomlin.
Okay.
And he started a thrash band, and he wanted to play some Metallica and stuff like that. And I used to love to play For Whom the Bell Tolls. And that was one of the songs they were going to do. And the name of their band was Trepidation. I said, well, I'll help you guys out, but, I can't be in another band. I said, I'm actually not that good on drums, but I can, keep
Right.
a beat or whatever at that time. And, we jammed and had a lot of fun. But he eventually did find a drummer and, played some gigs.
So you didn't go on to be their drummer?
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
But then eventually you realized, I better buy some drums.
Yeah, but that was much later.
Oh,
That was probably about 12 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So the Oneaters is really the band you've played in the longest for drums.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we're kind of jumping all over the place. I usually do this chronologically. So you said you started playing when you were 15. I know now that you were a Tech Centaur.
Yes.
So you were, a freshman in when you were playing? How old are you when you're 15? Or how? What grade? 15.
Yeah, I was in ninth grade, roughly.
Ninth grade, yeah.
Yeah, roughly ninth grade.
Lessons, where at?
Osiki's.
All right.
I started with Preston Lindy.
All right, yeah.
And then, moved on and did some with George Jordan.
Oh, yeah, George. Great.
And but, other people just taught me. And again, I'm a visual person, so I learned by watching people.
Right.
And, had fun with that.
So I know the Eyelids is an early band for you. Was it the first?
No, I was actually playing in two bands at the time. Okay. I was playing in Satin Steel, which was a hard rock band.
Right.
Then I was playing in a punk band, at the same time.
Right.
And the ironic thing is, playing in two bands back then, nobody was really doing that.
Yeah.
Like they're doing now,
Right. Yeah.
And it was a band we had in high school, and it was a lot of fun. We would actually play Sherlock's.
This is the Eyelids?
This is the Eyelids, yeah.
Okay.
We would play Sherlock's on a Monday night. It was called Modern Music Monday.
Right.
And I'd have to get up for school the next day.
Yeah, yeah. So you're playing till 2? Or
well, we were mostly an opening act.
Opening act,
yeah.
Right. And you obviously had one of the best drummers to ever come out of Erie, Chris Vrenna, on drums.
Yeah,
back then.
Chris was amazing.
Yeah.
We had an original drummer, and he didn't want to play much more anymore. So the singer, Matt Borzon, he says, "Hey, I got a guy," and he was 16 years old. And I remember him and his dad brought his drums down to my basement. And he had these amazing Slingerland cutouts. And if any drummers know what Slingerland cutouts are, they're just amazing.
Okay.
And so he played, and it's like, oh my gosh, this kid is beyond his years. What's he doing with us in a punk band?
Right.
And here I find out he's with the Philharmonic and all this. And
yeah, right.
Super, super talented.
Yeah.
So we played a lot of gigs with Chris.
Interesting.
And yeah, it was really cool.
So punk, and then, like you said, in Satin Steel, you're doing metal. I mean, you didn't care as far, you like it all?
It's music.
Yeah.
I like it all.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, yeah. And so from a guitar player standpoint, I mean, how different was that in playing those two bands? Are you a lead guy or are you a rhythm guy?
Mostly a rhythm guy.
Okay.
I have played lead. In the Eyelids, I was the only guitar player, so I kind of forced to play some leads there.
Okay.
But for the most part, Satin Steel, I did some. I let Ed Gangemi do a lot of them. He was a more experienced guitar player than I was at the time.
So can we transition into the Satin Steel?
Sure.
So we're talking like what, 80s, early 80s?
Early 80s. Yeah, we were still in high school,
right.
And we put Satin Steel together. Myself, Keith Clark, Jeff Sam, and Ed Gangemi.
Okay. And so you graduated in 82, so you're starting in 80, 81 with Satin Steel.
Yeah.
Okay. And, I mean, I wasn't in bands back then, when I was that young. I know a lot of the people on the podcast were. How did you get gigs to play in bars when you were that underage?
It was tricky.
Yeah.
Henrik Ostergaard gave us our first kind of gig.
Wow.
He was in his band called Crossfire.
Yeah.
And he was playing the alternative. It used to be on
McClellan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he wanted us to be his opening act.
How did you know him? Just
Ed knew him somehow.
Okay. A little older than you?
Yeah.
Right.
And so somehow, we opened for Henrik, and that was very cool.
So that was sort of the in?
Yeah, that was sort of the in.
Yeah.
We were different from most bands. We were, at the time, writing a lot of music, although not all of it was great, but
sure.
We were still
right.
doing original music, and
right.
we were focusing more on that. And we were picturing ourselves, okay, let's write original music. Let's come out with a record. Let's send it to record labels. Let's
right.
do this whole big thing. And that was our focus.
Yeah, so you were really focused on that. And that's Satin Steel. How about Eyelids? Was that original or
that
covers?
Was all original? I think we did like 2 or 3 covers.
Okay.
Just to mix it up a little bit.
Right.
But yeah. Tom Morris, he co-wrote a lot of stuff with Matt and I, Matt Borzon.
And so who else? So in the Eyelids was a 4-piece.
Yeah.
So drums, guitar, bass, and just singer?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. And Matt was the singer?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. And then Satin Steel, same thing, 4-piece?
4-piece, yeah. Jimmy Shadle, myself, and Keith Clark, Eddie Gangemi.
Okay.
Well, Jimmy came after a few other drummers, but Jeff Sam was the original drummer. Kevin Mendenhall was the one after that, and then Jimmy Shadle was the long-term drummer, finished out the band.
And I always, remember when I talked to Christopher, and he was talking about like when he was young and doing those gigs, and his dad would take him to the gigs in like their station wagon and stuff. I mean, were you guys even old enough to drive when you had some of those?
Yeah, I was probably 17.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, and playing Sherlocks.
Right.
And Norbs. We used to play Norbs pretty regularly.
Cool.
So, that was a lot of fun back in the day.
How much of your sets were original?
For
Satin Steel.
Satin Steel, we had a mix depending on where we would play. We wanted to play our original music, but sometimes people don't find it too acceptable.
Sure.
So we mixed in covers as well.
I feel like back then, like you said, Modern Music Mondays at Sherlock's, you had other places in town there was a lot more music than there is now, a lot more places to play than there is now. There was a lot more acceptance, I think, of original music.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a fair statement?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and we identified we're the same age, and so we kind of are familiar with the scene at the same time, With Satin Steel, though, was there, and you correct me, I don't know, were there other metal bands writing their own stuff at that time?
There was a lot.
Like Damien Steel was around.
Yeah, Damien Steel was another band, and there was always this conflict between the two bands because they had Steel in their names.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know how it got started, but the first time I saw Damien Steel, I was just like, oh my goodness.
Because they had been around before you guys.
I saw them as a trio, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these guys are amazing.
Right.
And then, they went through a number of singers and other members as well.
Right.
And, I was always kind of a fan, but we put up this facade of, battling back and forth, the better Steel band, I guess.
Where did the name come from, Satin Steel?
Oh, man.
Do you even remember? Or?
I do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Keith Clark had seen it in a catalog on a toy drum set. Okay. I'll have to send this picture to you.
Yeah. It's
a little kid on a toy drum set, and it says Satin Steel. And Keith always thought, hey, that would be a cool name for the band.
Yeah.
And then Jeff Sam and I, we kind of designed the logo together.
Right.
And
And so there was no wait, there's a band called Damien Steel.
No, we didn't know at the time.
Oh, okay. You didn't
we didn't know at the time.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I guess, but I mean, those guys, I became friends with all those guys.
Right.
Over the years. Jeff and I played in bands together. And
so did Satin Steel outlive the Eyelids?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Eyelids was.
Yeah, it kind of, after high school, we kind of all went our separate ways.
Right.
But yeah, I was more focused on, what I was doing with Satin Steel.
And what are you doing at the time? You're still in high school, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so did you eventually go on to college or?
No. Okay. My focus was going to be, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life,
Yeah, right.
So, I would go to concerts, and I would go there to learn. I wouldn't go there, to get stoned or drunk or anything like that. That didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
I would go there and learn. What are these guys doing, Just pick up on everything. And we kind of applied a lot of the things we learned. We were like one of the first bands in Erie to start wearing the whole spandex thing and, the bigger hair and the makeup and, that sort of thing. So we stood out a little bit.
I kind of ripped on Jeff Kroc when he was in, because I know at that time period, you had to dress the part.
Yeah.
And I said, where did you go and get that stuff? Like, I've seen pictures of you in those bands. I mean, do you remember where you picked that stuff up?
Yeah. I went to visit a friend in New York City, and we went down to Greenwich Village.
Perfect.
And we saw these shops down there. I'm like, oh, my goodness, let's go in this one. It was like Spandex City, And I'm looking on the walls, and there's like copies of checks from Eric Carr from Kiss. He bought stuff there, So I'm like, oh, man, this is cool. I'm buying stuff where, all these rock stars bought clothes.
Right.
And then I've gone up to Niagara Falls a number of times. Back in the 80s, they had all the stores up there, and you could just buy anything.
Really?
Really cool shirts, and then, you'd cut them up and tear them, and fishnet stuff and
Studs.
Oh yeah. I have all that.
Yep.
I still have everything.
Do you? Yeah. Jeff brought some in a briefcase and showed it to me. I said, I don't want to see you wearing any of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I figured that's not stuff that you're going to be able to sell at a garage sale.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was looking at even the picture here that you brought on this 45. I mean, it had to be like Ed's got a lot of makeup on.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
yeah, that's actually a painting a friend of ours did.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I have the original hanging in my studio.
Oh, now I see it closer. I need my glasses on.
There you
go. I mean, how was back then? Yeah, that's the photo I'm used to seeing. I mean, was the reception good, or were people busting you because of the way?
No. It was somewhat becoming acceptable.
Right.
At the
It was
time.
the time.
Yeah.
Right.
So the more ridiculous you looked, the more popular you would get. Sometimes the look would outshine the talent.
Right.
You focused more on the look than your hair and everything.
And there's also that element of a show.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've talked to a few different folks over the years about this. I mean, was some of that planned out? Like, hey, we're going to do this or that.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
We had planned out what we were going to do during certain songs and some choreography.
Yeah.
We knew where to step when there was a song. We'd rock back and forth together and
right. Yep.
So
and practice. How much are we talking? I mean,
at times we would practice twice a week, but for the most part, once a week.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
I thought you'd be like 4 days a week to get those steps down, those moves down. Yeah. So back then, Sherlock's, Oliver's around.
We played Oliver's.
MJ's around or no?
I played that with the Eyelids.
You did? Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That would be a modern music.
For sure.
Right,
now it's an antique store.
Indeed. Yes, it is.
I took my daughter in there, my youngest daughter. I said, "This is where the stage used to be."
Oh yeah,
So
yeah. I've never been in there, but everybody's talked about it. You know? And let's face it, a lot of the buildings aren't even around anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Lantern on 26th Street, we played there.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
There was that place on 38th and Pine Avenue where the Arby's is.
Oh, there was
Shenanigans. That's what it was.
Oh, where the Arby's is.
Yeah. There was a place there.
Huh. All right.
And we used to play at the Corner Bar in Ripley, New York.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
And that was pretty regular. We went to Fredonia. We played out there. There was a place called the Caboose.
Sure.
And
Tallis used to play at the
Caboose.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've seen Tallis there.
Yeah. I ran sound for a band that played out there. Yeah, before I was a musician.
Yeah, Satin Steel did a show with Tallis years ago, and Phil Nara was the singer at the time, and we ended up talking. We ended up talking about spandex,
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, I got some for sale." He goes, "I don't have it with me." So I hear they're playing the Caboose, so I'm like, I'm going to Fredonia. I'm going to go talk to Phil about some spandex. So
really,
I bought a pair of spandex pants off of Phil. So, yeah,
that's interesting.
That's funny.
Yeah. So in an upcoming episode, I told you I have John Novello, who plays in Niacin with Billy Sheehan too. Who played there a lot. Back then, and I never saw them live, but it had to be just incredible.
Oh yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. So you're recording where?
Well, we started first recording with Walt Slavinsky, and I just listened to his show, and
great guy.
I couldn't believe he's in his 80s.
Yeah, he's doing great. I just talked to him the other day. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, wow, he was only in his early 40s when we were recording there.
Yeah,
so,
right.
So I think we were like one of the first rock bands to record there.
Okay.
And
we're talking about Honey Bear for those of you who don't know. Yeah, right.
And we had a bunch of songs, and we narrowed them down to like 4 or 5 just to have demos of our original music. And Walt says, "Hey, I want you guys to try something." I'm like, okay. I got this guy that has these electronic drums. We're like, really?
Yeah.
There's these big octagon things,
sure.
Back in the early 80s. This had to have been about 80, 81.
Simmons. Or,
right. Roland Simmons, whatever.
Simmons, yeah.
And we're like, okay, we'll try it. And then we recorded using those electronic drums. And everybody's like, wow, that's an amazing drum sound. How'd you get that sound? we wouldn't tell anybody.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So were you spread out amongst the house into different rooms and stuff, as I've heard over the years at Waltz?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know?
The drums are in the living room and in his dining room area.
Right.
I mean, it's not even really a house, it's a studio.
Indeed, right, right, yeah.
What would typically be the dining room.
Did the drummer keep those drums?
No, he had a friend who had them, and they wanted to try him out.
Oh, okay.
So as a recording. So it was the first time that he recorded electronic drums.
Are they on any of your recordings?
They're on some demos.
Okay.
That we have. Yeah.
And so you're recording at Waltz with the plan, like you said, of submitting this to record labels, right?
Yeah.
What did you record? I see a 45 here, but I know you recorded more than that.
Oh, yeah.
Like enough for a whole album?
Not a whole album,
Okay.
but over time we had enough from different sessions
Okay.
that we could actually put an album together.
What did you do then? I mean, did everything kind of get stopped when Ed had his accident? Or
Yeah, well, the record had just come out, and we had a gig somewhere. I don't recall where it was. So we were kind of having a party at a friend's house, and he had a pool, so it's like a pool party.
Right.
And let's have a blast. So it's kind of like this is our party because the record came out. So, it might have been a month or so afterwards, but it was our little celebration.
Right.
So we're like, hey, all right. Hey, let's go plaster the town with flyers because we knew, bands in California did that. So that's why we did it,
Yeah.
Like, let's plaster the telephone poles with, staple gun and our flyers. So I didn't live too far away. I went home to get the flyers, and I came back, and they had pulled Ed out of the pool. He had dove into the pool and severed his spinal cord.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty traumatic.
Yeah. And this was 1986.
Yeah.
And so Ed wasn't able to play anymore, obviously, after that, and went into rehab in the hospital for a long time.
Yeah.
Did the band just dissolve?
It was put on hold.
Okay.
We weren't sure what we were going to do.
Right.
Ed was pretty much the leader of the band.
The driving force, right?
Yeah, the
Right.
most experienced musician.
Yep.
And it took a lot of time, but Keith and I were still writing, and with our drummer Jimmy, and Ed had stuff that he had recorded on cassette.
Okay.
And he said, this is one song I want to record. So he was home at the time, got home from the hospital.
Right.
And he really wanted to be involved with music. And so we actually went into Waltz again to record more songs. And Ed was there to sing a song. And it was a song that he wrote for the local TV show Erie Rocks.
Yep.
So the song is called Erie Rocks.
Okay, yeah.
And so that's Ed singing on that. That's the first time he sang
post-accident?
Post-accident, yes.
Okay. That was like a Cablevision show, right?
Yeah,
Or something. Yeah. Huh. And so how did he do? I mean...
Oh, he did great. He knew exactly what he was going to do. He layered his vocals because he had trouble breathing.
Right.
So he could only put out so much air and sing so much.
So he figured it out.
So he figured it out ahead of time, and he said, this is how I want to do it. And, yeah, it turned out real well.
Did you then perform ever with him in the chair?
Only one time.
Okay.
It was at Oliver's, and he was still in the hospital at the time.
Okay.
And Keith, Jimmy, and I were still figuring out what we were going to do. Like, we'll play as a trio, which I wasn't comfortable with because I wasn't crazy about playing all the lead guitar.
Right.
Because I'm more of a rhythm guy than anything.
And are you a singer too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so Ed got a release from the hospital to come to Oliver's.
Wow.
And he sang with us.
Wow.
And, it was an amazing experience.
I
I had
bet.
tears in my eyes.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Wow. So that blows my mind just thinking about that. This ticket that you brought me here says, Don Weston's Troubadour, Satin Steel, March 1987. So how does this happen? I mean,
Yeah.
if the band is
Keith and I were still, the moving force.
Moving forward.
Yeah, moving forward with the band. Jeff Russell had joined the band,
Okay.
Mike Russell's brother.
Sure, I graduated with him.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah. And Jeff put a whole new flavor into the band. It was, he's a really great drummer.
Great drummer, yeah.
And so we talked, like, let's go to California. Okay, well, let's figure this out first, So, again, doing things that, thinking outside the box in the 1980s, we started sending our demo tapes to record companies.
Okay.
I believe Keith had gone to the library and looked up all the addresses of all the record companies because there was no internet,
I was going to say, kids, that's what you had to do, look in a book.
Yeah. And we started putting promo packs together with a cassette, a record, picture, everything. Right. And the funny thing is, we would send them ransom notes. We would cut, letters
out.
Yeah. And we would send them a letter ahead of time. It would be the ransom note. So, I think I have one of those letters somewhere.
Yeah.
But it said, coming your way, look out for Satin Steel. So we wanted to get their attention.
Right.
And then another time the Satin Steel logo, the S's, Keith had some satin pants that he ripped or something. So Satin Steel, okay. So we started cutting out S's out of his satin pants, and then we started cutting some steel S's. So we sent a satin S and a steel S to the record companies just to get their attention.
Sure, right.
And then, it's amazing what that did,
Really?
Again, thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
We actually had labels interested in us.
Wow.
Keith and I actually, we sent demos to A&M Records.
Okay.
They have an office in Toronto. And our friend Dan Law drove us up there. He was the only one that had a reliable car. And
at this point, it's three of you?
Yeah, the three of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So Keith and I, somehow we got a hold of him, sent our demos. Keith followed up with a phone call, and he says, "Yeah, I like this stuff. It's pretty good. Can you send more?" So I'm like, "Oh man, we got to send more stuff." So I think we went into another studio and did a few more, and then sent those. And he's like, "Yeah, these are good, but we're not ready yet or anything like that." So Keith says, "Okay, let's make an appointment to go see him." So we actually went to A&M Records in Toronto, made an appointment with the A&R director, and we re-recorded some stuff. And I think we did that on a 4-track because he wasn't concerned about highly polished music. He just wanted to hear some good demos.
Right.
So we did a lot of stuff on a 4-track, and we took him up to A&M Records. Max Hutchinson was the guy there. I still remember his name.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Yeah.
I mean, here I am, 19 years old, walking the A&M Records and meeting with the A&R director.
I'm surprised they took the meeting.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So it was just a great experience. Obviously we didn't get signed, but Bryan Adams was on the label,
Absolutely.
that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So we're a little bit heavier than they were really interested in.
Okay, all right.
But still, we sent stuff out to California. And at the time, there was an indie label called Enigma.
Okay.
And they were actually interested in us. And those were the phone calls I was making. And Stryper was on Enigma, their first album.
Okay.
And a bunch of other, hair bands at the time.
So they were in your wheelhouse.
Yeah. So talked to them a number of times, and I said to them, and maybe I'm getting my timeline all mixed up. I said, "Should we come out to California?" He says, "Definitely." So that's when we decided to go out there.
And you're moving to California.
So we're making the plans.
Yeah.
So Keith is like, "We need a manager." Like, "Yeah, we do." Okay. So this is 86. Yeah.
Okay.
86 going in 87. Yeah. So we were out there in, what year was that?
Oh,
87, okay.
87.
Yeah.
March 1st, 1987 is the ticket,
Yeah. So we're out there in 87, but Keith is like, we need a manager. So he gets a hold of a manager named Vicki Hamilton, if anybody knows who Vicki Hamilton is, was the manager of 3 bands. She only did 3 bands at a time. One was Guns N' Roses, Faster Pussycat, and another one. I don't remember which one it was.
Okay.
And, Keith had a conversation with her, and she's like, yeah, all your stuff is cool. She said, I don't have room for another band right now.
Right.
But, if something comes up, because she was working seriously with Guns N' Roses.
Sure, right.
And so we're like, well, we can find another manager. So we found another manager, and it was cool. So we got things set up out there before we moved out there.
Okay, all right.
So, we weren't just going to be, dumb kids and just move out there and say, here we are.
And so what happens? I mean, I've talked to Tim McLaughlin in the past who did the same thing. They make the trip out there, they're all living in a house in squalor, essentially, just, barely surviving. I mean, what was your situation like?
Exactly the same.
Okay.
We
a lot of ramen noodles and hot dogs.
Yeah, first thing we did was we got a rehearsal studio.
Okay.
And we lived there in the studio for probably maybe a month or 2.
Where are we? L.A.?
Yeah, East L.A.
Okay, all right, great,
yeah,
great.
Yeah,
okay.
Great neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it's this big industrial area, and they had these 2 giant buildings that were made into areas for bands to practice.
Oh, okay.
And down the hall from us was Megadeth.
Wow.
And King Cobra, if you remember them.
Yeah.
Carmen Appice.
So early days, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, we'd run into those guys, and, there was just so many bands. And
right.
There was I went into one practice one time. There was a band called Mad Rain, and Keith and I were there just to hear them. And they had a full PA in their small room, and it got so loud I got dizzy. I had to leave. So if you can imagine walking down the hallway of this, it was like 3 stories of just bands. So you had music above you, below you, next to you,
right,
all hours of the day.
And you're living there.
I'm living there, yes.
Yeah.
So,
I imagine you weren't the only ones living there.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
Yeah, I'm surprised somebody like Carmine would be even there.
Yeah,
at that
well,
point.
they would just use it for rehearsal.
Oh,
but,
okay, yeah.
But we eventually got an apartment, after we got things. Priorities.
Sure.
Rehearsal
right.
space.
Right, yeah. And the 3 of you are always living together.
Yeah, well, Jeff Russell couldn't come out with us.
Oh, okay, so it's just you and
So just Keith and I.
Okay.
But our manager had set up a guitar player. If I can remember this correctly, Keith flew out there ahead of time and was auditioning guitar players, and he found one. And his name was Todd Atwood. He was from Munster, Indiana.
Okay. And
so I'm like, yeah, this guy's really good. And our manager found a drummer. His name was Brian Brann.
Okay.
And they booked us at the Troubadour, the Waters Club.
And who's singing at this point?
Keith and I.
Oh, both of you.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And you're playing some of the songs that Ed wrote and sang on before, or all the newer stuff?
It was mostly the newer stuff, some of the old stuff, but nothing really Ed sang on. Those songs were sacred to Ed.
Yeah, I wondered about that.
Yeah.
How did Ed feel about that at the time that you guys were out there?
Yeah, there were some hard feelings.
I'm sure.
That we were moving on without him.
Right.
Because he could sing, but it was difficult. Like Def Leppard, Rick Allen lost his arm, and they had problems and difficulties and feelings, and it all worked out. But it all worked out with Ed.
So you played a few key places out there.
Well, we played the Troubadour, and that was amazing to walk outside and see our name on the marquee.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, Van Halen played here. The Doors played here.
Absolutely.
The Eagles played here.
The Eagles were discovered there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the Sad Cafe song is written about Troubadour.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So it's like amazing. I wish I would have had my camera at the time and take a picture of that.
So this is 87, so you would physically have to have a real camera
yes.
Film it.
Yes, and I was, did not have money.
Right.
You're paying for an apartment and a rehearsal studio and working, and it's crazy.
When you're playing the Troubadour, are you the only ones on the bill, or is there a bunch of folks?
We were the headliner. There was 2 bands ahead of us,
No way.
which our manager set up.
Right.
And but yeah, that was pretty amazing.
Do you remember what you got paid?
that's the funny thing.
Yeah.
It's Los Angeles. It's pay to play.
Oh, what?
Back in the 80s, you had to pay to play.
Really?
Yeah. This ticket here, you'd have to go into the office of the Troubadour and buy tickets and sell them. That's how you got paid.
Wow. Holy cow. So how did you do?
We didn't do very well.
Yeah,
right. we're a band from Pennsylvania,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
And what was March 1st? What day of the week?
you'd have to look that up.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you remember, like, was it a Saturday or Friday? Was it a good crowd? Or
Oh, yeah, for the most
yeah?
part.
Okay.
And, it was pretty amazing, being in the dressing room, that Troubadour.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's got to be one of those experiences where you're like, okay, I feel like this went well, and I can put that notch.
Yeah.
I mean, after that, was everything kind of downhill from there? Or?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
My favorite movie, one of my favorite movies is That Thing You Do.
Yeah.
And, I lived the 80s version of that movie.
Right.
Basically,
Absolutely. Right.
Because we had the record in Erie, moved out to California, fell apart,
right.
come back,
And then you form a band named after the band in that
yeah,
movie.
eventually.
Yeah, right, yeah. Okay. All right. So is that what happened? How much longer are you out there?
Not much longer. Personal issues with me, Keith. His girlfriend had moved out there, and they stayed out there for a while after I left. I came back, and the guitar player left, and the drummer, I'm not sure what happened to him.
Okay, yeah,
but
they weren't from Erie.
They weren't from Erie. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, it just kind of fell apart, and Keith and I agreed that I'm going to go back home, and he was going to stay. I wasn't sure if he was going to try to keep it together.
Yeah.
But he eventually came back.
And you come back to Erie to do what? Did you have a job? Or
I didn't have a job. I it was 87, so it was just,
find what you can.
Hang out at Sherlock's.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I started landscaping back in the day.
You did? Okay.
Yeah. And
yeah, you can't sell those outfits yet. Or you didn't even you probably still had some of those.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So in 87, you kind of start playing with another guy who is no longer with us, John Rainey. But you tell me a bit about that. Like you get involved with NRG, right, or Mistress?
Yeah, it was basically an early version of the Exit.
Okay, all right.
And Dal Heinzen, Kevin Hultberg,
yep,
and
Ron
Lesh on the drums.
Oh yeah, right.
And they added me as a second guitar player with Dal Heinzen.
Okay.
And we played. Practice more than anything, mostly original stuff, and the stuff these guys were writing was intricate.
And it was metal.
It was progressive rock.
Okay.
I don't know if you're real familiar with Exit, but
yeah,
kind of some of that music continued on. And they saw themselves with a keyboard player, not really a guitar player.
Oh.
So they let me go, and they brought Eric Christensen in to play keyboards. Right. And, I had a great relationship with those guys. There was no hard feelings or anything like that.
Never played out with them?
Never played out with them.
Just practiced, right.
And then, ironically, I don't know how it happened, but John Rainey and Jeff Kroc, myself, Wally Urkanis, and we got together and we were like, we need a drummer. And Wally's like, hey, I got a cousin who plays drums, Mark Smith.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So we kind of put Strutter together.
Yeah. Yeah, and at the time, like I talked to Jeff about this, like the Strutter Kiss band was not around.
Right.
And so that was, again, kind of like Satin Steel, just a coincidence.
Yeah.
Damian Steele and Satin Steel. So this is 88 around, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, because I know that you played on the same bill with Mars in 88, in March of 88, which I thought had to have been a kind of a cool gig.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved Mars.
Yeah.
What a great band.
Who were the guys in that? Do you remember?
Jim Baldoff, Todd Bainbridge was a guitar player.
Oh, he was? Okay.
Well, Scotty Davis also played in that band, too. Mark Schulich played in that band.
That's right.
So there's a number of people.
Yeah, I always think of Schulich with that.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So you form, I mean, John Rainey, you must have known of him, obviously.
Oh, I've known John prior to even going to California.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right. Just from the music scene?
Just from the music scene and gear, guitars, amps. the deals we made. I mean, the stuff.
Right.
I mean, I don't think there's a guitar in Erie that any musician didn't know that didn't belong to John Ray.
Right,
at one
absolutely.
time.
Until he passed a few years ago, or last year.
Last year,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you would constantly see him posting on Facebook, I owned that guitar.
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
You know, so where were you buying your gear back then?
My first guitar, the first good guitar, I bought a Gibson Les Paul 1979 Cherry Sunburst from Little John's Music Village.
Oh, okay.
And it was just like the greatest thing ever.
Was that in New York?
No, that was here in Erie.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was on Peach Street where the Andy's Gold Crown Billiards is.
Oh,
there was
okay.
a little place, Little John's Music
So
Village.
I thought MES went in there eventually.
Eventually, yeah.
Oh, okay. So
on the other side, I think, somewhere around
yeah,
there.
okay, all right.
But yeah, I remember putting it in layaway.
That's a killer guitar.
$500. How am I going to pay for this? Oh, I'll get a job at Burger King.
Yeah,
That's what I did, and paid off my guitar.
You probably wish you still had that guitar.
I still lose sleep over it. I still lose sleep over selling that guitar.
And so, did it turn into that sort of merry-go-round of? Are you one of those guys that's constantly changing instruments?
I'm not constantly changing, but
Oh.
I'm constantly buying.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, I'm a collector.
You are.
Yeah.
So if I talk to your wife, she's going to be.
Yeah,
That's a problem.
I have a problem with buying guitars, and of course, being a drummer, you need more than one drum set, right?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah,
Those don't
so-
take up any room.
No,
Yeah,
not at all.
yeah.
So yeah, I've got drums, keyboard.
Right.
I have a studio in my home, so
You got plenty of room for it.
I got a little bit of room for it. Yeah.
But back then, I mean, we all know, like, you'd go to maybe Ron's to hang out, even if this was before Ron's, or even going to Markham's, or,
Yeah.
I mean, Bowling's to a degree, and you'd hang out. And
Yeah.
oftentimes John would be there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I mean, is that that's pretty much how you met him over the years? And
I met him. It must have been around 80 or 81.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Real
so
early.
real early.
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
I mean, he sold me my first Marshall stack, my first Flying V.
where was he at, Markham's?
No, he was he wasn't working at a music store at the time.
I thought
yeah.
you meant,
No,
gotcha,
yeah.
right, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he had that
Yeah.
and he sold it to me.
Right.
And so he and I just, through the years, we traded some stuff, and
Gotcha.
I would always buy stuff from him.
Right.
So, but yeah, I'm addicted to guitars.
So it's you and him. Obviously, he's doing leads.
Yes.
I imagine. And Wally on bass, Jeff singing, Mark's on drums. What type of stuff is Strutter doing?
We're doing like everything from the time: Cinderella, Scorpions,
Okay.
pretty much everything.
Wearing the spandex, got the hair.
Yeah.
You're a bald guy now, but you had lots of it back
I
then.
had hair. Nobody believes I had big hair, but
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you probably used some Aquanet back then.
oh yeah,
And
yeah.
Sherlock's same places.
Sherlock's. Yeah,
Out of town?
Out of town, we would play Feel Goods up in Conneaut and
Okay.
the Cove in Geneva.
Okay, yeah.
And we did some stuff in Jamestown, and
Well, Feel Goods is the famous one.
yeah,
Where
yeah.
John fell off the stage, and
Yes.
you have the video of that.
Yes.
Yeah, that you've posted, that I posted
It's-
in a previous episode.
I can't believe it was actually caught on video. It's not the greatest video because
No.
it's, the camera and lighting from '88.
Right,
So-
exactly, right.
But yeah, I had that footage somehow, and somebody brought it up that, on Facebook or something, John Rainey fell off the stage, and I'm like, yeah, I have that video. So I put together a little video, edited a video for it, and it was amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, he fell off the stage, and he kind of rolled and ended up under a table.
Oh, geez.
And so our friend Max was there, and he kind of helped him up, walked across the dance floor, grabbed my Les Paul. He finished the song with my Les
I was
Paul.
going to say, and you guys never stopped. I mean, I've seen
No,
the
we
video.
never stopped,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't something that he had done before. This had to be shocking, I mean,
Oh, it
I've
was.
seen the video, and it was like, what do we do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see me just kind of laughing and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like, how did this even happen?
Right. And his guitar, did it get...
It got out of whack. He didn't break it.
he didn't break it.
But it was way out of tune.
Yeah.
If you bang a Floyd Rose like that on the floor, and it's going to
For sure.
get out of tune.
That story followed him for years.
Yeah.
I mean, that was one of the most famous stories around at that time, don't you think? I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah. I mean, I heard stories about, he fell and he hit a table and there were people at the table and chairs and all that stuff. And then you finally get to see the actual video.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And he was a good sport about it.
And so talk about John. I mean, I've always heard that about him, like dedicated dude in a band.
Yeah.
Right?
John was one of my musical mentors.
Yeah.
I mean, he really taught me a lot about playing. His biggest thing to me, and he would say it funny, when in doubt, whammy out.
Really?
Playing lead,
Yeah.
So that always stuck with me. But yeah, John, anytime he really took Strutter, really and took it seriously and really took the lead and made sure all of us were playing the parts right, because John can play drums, he can play bass, he can play.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he does all of that.
Okay.
And so he would help all of us. If there was a chord I didn't know, he'd show it or whatever, and he's like, okay, we're going to do harmony lead on this. I'm like, okay, so we're doing the Trooper from Iron Maiden, and
sure,
we got to have that harmony guitar, and
so he was patient and worked with you
on
that type of stuff.
Yeah. Wally was still a little bit green. He was not so experienced.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, he just worked with Wally too, and really made Wally into a really good bass player.
I know when I interviewed Mark Nelson last season, he was in Livewire with John early on, in like the late 70s and stuff. And he said the same thing. Like from the get-go, he was a super dedicated dude. So if you're in a band with him, like you're serious.
Oh, yeah.
It's not half-assed stuff.
Right.
And that's how he was.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You had mentioned previously, we should say, that Ed was also one of your mentors.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he helped me early on.
Again, Jimmy,
yeah,
we should point out.
Eddie,
yeah.
And so he and John were instrumental in really helping me evolve as a guitar player.
Right.
And just, get better, to better myself.
And you weren't, those Preston Lindy days were behind you.
Yeah.
I mean, once you started playing, it's just like you said, I'm watching, I'm learning. You weren't taking formal lessons.
No,
okay.
I was done. I just got the basics.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Strutter, how long does that last?
That lasted a couple years. I think we broke up either late 88 or 89.
Okay.
And then...
do you know why?
No.
I mean, we've all been in those bands,
It's, the 80s. I always tell people that I don't remember a lot of the 80s, but I know I was there because I saw pictures.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe some wanted to do other things, and
right.
Personality clashes at times.
Yep.
I mean, that's a real thing.
Absolutely.
In bands.
Right.
And then some friends wanted us to reunite. And
yeah, I saw that.
Yes.
Like in '90, you reunited and opened for Harpo, right? At Sherlock?
Yeah, we did an opening slot with Harpo. Yeah, we got together, practiced, and we were super tight. And
really?
It was amazing. And then we played the gig, but all of us were so busy doing other things.
Okay, yeah.
At the time, I had my lighting company, so I wasn't playing regularly at the time.
Oh, okay, right.
But yeah, Kristen and Linda, friends of ours, got us together. They actually made a spaghetti dinner and said, you guys are coming over for dinner, and you guys are going to do a reunion.
Yeah.
So we talked it out and said, okay, let's do it. So
cool.
Spaghetti dinner put Strutter back together for one night.
But prior to that, you do a little bit with Knockout?
Yeah, that was after Strutter.
Was that? Yeah, that's what I mean. After Strutter and before the reunion.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
I think so. I think Strutter or Knockout was a little later.
I'm looking at from my research. So September '88, you were playing in Knockout, which was the Times News said you were a new band, and it featured you and Jeff Kroc, former members of Strutter.
Yeah.
And then in '89, it looked like the band had transitioned a bit, and I think Jeff was out.
Yes.
And Chris Hansen's on guitar. He played in Sable.
Yes.
With the Butler Brothers, right?
Yes, correct.
And then Bill Jacobs is your singer? That's what it
yes.
said.
Yeah. Actually, Bill's actually the drummer from Sable. But he became the lead singer of Knockout.
Was Wally in the band for a while?
Yeah.
Okay.
In Knockout, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was kind of an evolution from Strutter to Knockout.
Right, yeah.
And, we played a lot of shows. had a lot of fun with that band.
What type of music? Same thing?
Pretty much the same thing.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I hadn't heard of them.
Chris Hansen was such an amazing guitar player,
Right.
and ironically, I got to play with him later, in 2013 or 14 or whatever, with Dual Identity.
Yeah, right.
So
Okay.
yeah, so it was great to be reunited with Chris.
Yeah. That's cool. All right. So, Croc got booted out of that band, I take it?
No.
Or
I
left?
think he got a really good offer from a band in Buffalo.
That's right. He played with the AC/DC band, yeah, was it the AC/DC band?
can't-
I think, and he
I
started
can't
traveling with them a little bit.
Yeah, that might have been the case.
Yeah,
the
that's
timeline is just so blurry.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. I mean, this is a long time ago, and the little bit of research that I do kind of gives me a guideline for
Sure.
it. So in March of '90, I always talk about this podcast stops at 89, 90, and we've covered a lot of that stuff. But you obviously continue playing, and you play in Witness for a little bit. Top 40 metal.
Just a rock band. I
Yeah.
think we played one gig and
That's it.
fell apart.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, Alan Bainbridge on lead vocals.
Okay.
and,
So he played in the other band you were mentioned. Did he play in Mars? Or that was
No.
Todd Bainbridge.
Todd Bainbridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brothers?
No,
No,
No.
not related.
No.
Okay, all right. And so
Alan Bainbridge. Did I say Alan?
you did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mixed that up too. And so that's like 91, like you said. When you at this point, you're married and have kids.
I'm married, and I still have my lighting company.
And you still have your lighting
And I'm going on the road with bands.
Great.
And one band I was on the road with was they were Nightwish, I believe, at the time.
Oh yeah.
And Frank Bellamini had the sound system.
Yeah.
And I had the lighting. So we would provide that for the bands. And I needed help, so I would bring Jeff Kroc along.
Right.
Because Jeff's just a great guy to be with
He is
all
a
the
great-
time.
He
All
is.
the time.
He's always on, yeah. And him and Frank play together now.
Yeah. So we were actually in Kane, Pennsylvania at a gig with Nightwish. And Frank, Jeff, and Frank says, "Hey, I just got a Gibson SG." Like, "Oh, that's cool." He goes, "We should play an AC/DC, or play in an AC/DC tribute." I'm like, "Well, Jeff can nail AC/DC,
Absolutely, yeah, right.
And I'm like, "I like playing rhythm guitar. I'd have no problem being Malcolm.
Yeah, right.
So we're like, "Okay, there's three of us. Okay, we need a drummer and a bass player." And I'm like, "Boy, who can we get?" Because everybody's been in bands, and there's,
Sure.
bass players and drummers are limited.
Right.
It's always everybody's playing guitar.
Right.
So I call Chris Rodler,
Right.
and I said, "Chris, would you be interested in playing bass in an AC/DC
Yeah, I was
tribute
going to
band?"
say, I think of him as a guitar player.
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
Right.
He just blows my mind. And he says, "Yeah, I'll do it." So he was the bass player in Thunderstruck.
So it became Thunderstruck.
It became Thunderstruck. And then Bill Jacobs played drums in Thunderstruck.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So by this time, you obviously have plenty of connections and,
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
Thunderstruck's around for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple years.
Yeah.
And then, I was the first one to leave. It got to the point where I needed to be a father more than
Sure. Right.
a rocker, I guess.
Right, yeah.
And so I stepped away from music for a long time, probably, 8-9 years.
Okay.
And slowly got back into it.
Did you slowly get into it with Dual Identity?
No,
was it the
I had met
Ometers?
some friends, and we would get together and just jam acoustics, and a guy had a drum set in his basement. I'm like, "I'll be the drummer."
This is the evolution of you as a drummer.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah.
So, my passion to play drums, they're like, "Well, you're a guitar player. You should be playing." And I'm
Yeah.
like, No. I want to play drums.
Okay.
So that's kind of what happened. It was just two guys, an acoustic guitar and me. Then I had a bass player, and then, just here and there play. And then we got together one night, and a couple guys, and like, "Hey, this sounds pretty good."
Right, yeah.
And so let's do this. And slowly but surely, we started getting little gigs, little winery gigs.
Did you have a name?
We didn't. We kind of had a name, but it sounded like a death metal band. So we
And you weren't doing death metal.
we were not doing death
Okay.
metal. Yeah.
Right.
So I had just got done watching That Thing You Do.
Sure, right.
And again, one of my favorite movies.
Me too, yeah.
And I thought, you know what? We should be the Oneaters.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, well, yeah, they're like, yeah, we should do that. I'm like, well, what if there's a lawsuit? Let's change it up a little bit. We don't want any copyright infringement. So we changed it to the Oneaters, spelled it a little differently. We actually turned it into a last name. So the O''Neaters.
Oh, gotcha.
So,
right.
just like the Ramones, they all took on the last name.
Yeah, right.
We all take on that last name in the band. Yeah.
Okay.
So Jeff Oneater and
I didn't know that.
Tom and John Oneater.
You all wear the red shirts?
Well, we mix it up.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right.
Whatever, we text each other, what are we wearing this gig, red shirts, black ties, okay.
And you've been playing for 10 years, 11?
10, 12 years, yeah.
I mean, that's the longest band you've probably been in.
It is, yeah.
And this is, I've seen the list, it's classic rock.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not as heavy as some of the other previous bands we've talked about. You are just playing drums? I mean, you sing, obviously.
Yeah. I'm singing, playing drums, and then Jeff, the other guitar player, he can keep a pretty good beat on drums.
So I wondered, do you
So
switch?
I come out front, and I actually sing, play guitar, but I also play keyboards, too.
Okay.
So I make my way around.
And so you had... Maybe I'll just say one of the best gigs for this band last year at the ballpark when the original cast from the movie come. 3 of the guys come, right?
Yeah, that was amazing.
How did that evolve?
Well, we had heard that. I think my brother had texted me and said, "Hey, the Wonders are coming to Erie for the Seawolves game," and I texted Jeff, our guitar player, and we had done some Seawolves pregame shows in the past.
Yeah.
And so I said, Jeff, go do your magic, Yeah. So he had always had good contacts down to Seawolves. And he went down there. He was wearing an Oneater shirt, and he went to go see the person he needed to talk to. And he goes, the Oneaters, I know exactly what that is. And so Jeff said, we would like to, perform.
Right.
And so they thought it was the greatest idea to have the Oneaters perform when the Wonders or the old Oneaters, whatever, are in town.
And they weren't going to play.
No, they weren't going to play.
Make a performance.
But
or make an appearance.
When we did meet them, it was kind of cool. We had our pictures taken with them and everything.
I saw the pictures.
And Jonathan Scheck actually put Jeff's guitar on, and he's strumming the chords to That Thing You Do. And he's like, I can't believe I remember this.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, because they always wonder, were they playing some of that stuff?
Yeah, they actually learned their instruments.
They did?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, so Steve Zahn was really,
he's not an actor. That's just him all the time.
I wondered, he's just like a crazy fun guy, it seems like. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. He's just super, super funny. You just walking into anywhere near him and you're laughing.
Yeah.
And he was super cool.
They were cool to you guys?
Oh, yeah. I forgot the guy's Thomas Scott.
Thomas Scott,
yeah. He saw my drums. He's like, oh, my gosh, sweet drums. And I should have thought to get a picture of him behind my kit.
Yeah,
right.
But, Shades.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
It was cool to have that connection.
Yeah.
And then we played the song That Thing You Do, and they're out on the field dancing. And
do you do that song as a regular part of your... Okay,
yeah.
Wonderful song.
We usually open up our second set with that.
Nice.
And
it's a great soundtrack written by the guy from Fountains of Wayne.
Right.
It's awesome. I mean, it's one of my favorites. I'm with you. So. Well, we've kind of come full circle.
Yeah, we sure have.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being with us today. This was great. And that picture that we just talked about of you with the Real Wonders, you sent that to me. I'd encourage everybody to check out your episode page because I'll show the pictures of you in those wonderful spandex. And all the evolution of your hair.
Yes.
And we'll take some pictures of these tickets and the 45. But thanks, Jamie. I appreciate you being here.
It's a real privilege to be here and glad I could be part of this. Like I said, I'm a podcast junkie, so this is great to be a part of this.
Cool. All right.
And thanks for all the work you're doing for everything music with Erie.
Love it.
It's great.
Love it. Yeah. Well, thanks, man.
Thank you.
We thank the JPT Foundation for the sponsorship of this podcast and all the other folks who have supported it via Patreon. Also, remember, if you want to find out what's going on in town, listen to Jack Stevenson's Two-Man Happy Hour podcast. That's the number 2, manhappyhour.com. Jack does a fantastic job of supporting the local scene today, telling you where and when everybody's playing. So check that out when you have a chance. All right, thanks for listening to episode 20 of the Erie Music History Podcast. We have one more episode in season 2, and then I'm going to take a break for a few weeks, and then we'll come back with season 3. Take care.